you need to go to take like some time off, like you need to go inside, please do so. Here we understand it's really warm. Even for me as a Mexican, this is really warm. So we have an agenda for our time together. I know it's really hard to see, so no, don't, yeah, we thought it was going to be a larger group, but we're really happy you're here. So we have like some time for welcome, and we also want our chairs, like the ones that are supporting this working group, to introduce themselves. Claire and Anne, both of them are here today, so we will take a time for them to introduce themselves. Just like 1 or 2 minutes will be okay, and then we will be talking about lessons learned from previous work. We will go over the work that IFIP did last year, and we also need your help designing the plan for this year. This is a great opportunity for us to have funders and people working with Indigenous communities here. So we need your help. We want you to design, to tell us what is needed so we can work on that. And then we will just at the end have like some time for reflections and for a discussion on collaboration. Are we okay with that? See? Okay. And I'm sorry, I think I didn't introduce myself. I'm Anabel Lopez from Oaxaca, Mexico, but I do actually reside in Vancouver, Canada. Okay, I forgot. Yeah, so like we are a very small group, so we would just do a quick intro. See?
Ricky Archer from the North Australian Indigenous Land and Sea Management Alliance, based in Darwin, North Australia.
Wait, Chris Archie, Sequetum de Galmuch, and CEO with the Circle on Philanthropy.
Buenas tardes, Sangaitla, Valine Iskian, Kaistahanas, and Indikiang. My name is Arvaline and Kaistahanas, and I am with the Circle on Philanthropy.
Buenos dias, everyone. I'm Ann Henshaw. I'm a program officer with Oak Foundation and live, work, and play on the unceded territories of the Wabanaki peoples in Maine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Biani Matza from Oaxaca as well. I am the manager of the Keepers of the Earth Fund at Cultural Survival.
Thank you. Nilege. It is good afternoon in English, okay. It's my language from Burma, Indigenous language from Burma, but I now reside in Washington, D.C. My name is Mara Dagipa, and the Senior Partnership Officer for International Justice and Accountability with Unitarian Universalist Service Committee.
Hi, my name is Genesis. With Cielo, Comunidades Indígenas en Liderazgo, we focus on indigenous migrants in the U.S. I am a child of migrants, but my family is from here. My grandma's maybe like an hour away.
Hi, my name's Katie Schofield, and I am I work in Great Apes and Gibbon Conservation at Arcus Foundation, and I'm in the UK.
I'm Jessica Swaden. Oh, it is. Founder and trustee for Synchronicity Earth, based in London in the UK.
Hello, everyone. I'm Francisco, and I'm with Azimuth World Foundation, and I came from Portugal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Jonas with the ICC Consortium from Canada.
Hi everyone, my name is Mauricio Núñez. I manage CALOR, stands for Collectives of Local Action for Regeneration, based in Cusco, Peru.
Hola a todos. My name is Kate Trujillo, and I am the Deputy Director at the Honnold Foundation. We're based in the United States, and we're remote, but I'm in Oregon.
Hi everyone, Claire Polking. I'm a program officer with the MacArthur Foundation based in Chicago.
Hello everyone, I am Victor Masun and I come from here, Yucatan. I come from a community, the name Yashuna means the first house. And I am with Fundación Naciones del Mundo Maya and I'm volunteer.
Gracias, Víctor, por tu trabajo.
Hello, I'm Lourdes Singa, Quechua descent from Peru, and the Executive Director of IFIP, and happy to be here, and currently live and work in the ancestral lands of the Maidu and Nisenan people in Northern California.
Hello, my name is Mirna Canulo. I think today I will be your translator, but I have some experience with these kind of associations because I have worked in a community radio station.
Hello everyone. My name is Varvara. I work at the Dartmouth College at the Institute of Arctic Studies, and I'm proud IFIP scholarship recipient. Thank you.
Thank you all because you make it possible for like the scholarship recipients to be here today. So yeah, thank you, Barbara. So we are gonna continue, and before we discuss about the objective of this session today, is like, as I said before, we would love,
which is an organization that gets a percentage of every land purchase that happens in British Columbia, which is a province in Canada. That interest sits in an account, and then the foundation puts the money out. The project with them is to do case studies and research. What are all of the legal and technical steps required to transfer land in the context of British Columbia around the federal and provincial jurisdictions? What is the kind of specific title that Indigenous, like First Nations specifically, communities can hold, right? Because the federal government dictates what classification that land is under. So doing all of that learning, and then the next piece is to do an education piece so that notary publics, real estate agents, and all
the different skill sets that need to be built up. And then the other thing, so I'm the deputy director at the Honnold Foundation, and we work with grassroots organizations that use solar energy as a tool for community and economic development. And one of the things that would be really interesting to see is the different tools that help feed land back movements. So for example, we work with an organization in Ecuador to put solar on land patrol stations so that the land defenders in that region have power to use the drones and all of the technology they need to maintain their borders and to record and photograph when people are intruding on their lands. So that's one example. Another big example has been in the Pacific Islands. We work with a group that we helped increase access to internet and technology so that they can communicate amongst themselves when there's any sort of land intrusion and kind of, strategize that way. So it'd be interesting to see like what different tools help secure lands. Yeah.
I think this is more questions for the rest of the group rather than because I want to learn from all of you. But a couple of things we've been supporting. One is a number of partners, mainly in the Congo Basin, looking at land rights back, but where there's been massively massive human rights abuses in the name of conservation. So it'd be really great to hear if there's other cases people have worked on outside that region or in that region where successful land back is happening and where people are actually then able to manage those areas and respected for it. And then the other thing is, I'm working with my other hat, I didn't say, with the Agroecology Fund. We've just been doing something around like agroecology in the Congo Basin and how can that be used to help secure land rights for territorial protection. And I think that also responds to this piece around how large numbers of groups within conservation are supporting livelihoods that are often not connected to land rights. So I'm quite interested in that, how we can start making sure that livelihoods in this space, conservation space, are also tied into the land rights picture. So yeah, more questions than what I'm actually learning.
White Kwahuadip, Don Morrison at Squest. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. I went to the wrong session, but I'm happy to have found this discussion and hear what I've heard so far. And I apologize for not knowing the exact question, but I'm just kind of picking up on what I've heard so far. And I guess further to the last question around agroecology and how it could be a potential point of entry to secure land rights. The work that I do as founder and curator of the Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty is currently leading a research project on mapping out and advocating for the establishment of Indigenous foodland conservation areas. So as a concept in development, stemming from the concept kind of being conceived after about 18 years of facilitating transformational learning in food systems networks in so-called BC in Canada. And so with that, we are looking at different legal instruments, like I guess thinking about the Indigenous Protected Conservation Areas framework, which is federal under Canada's Pathway Target 1 framework, as just in its potential for mobilizing knowledge and networks, because it's a concept where people know it, and I guess in our learning that we've done over the last 18 years and some of the insights we've gained is that the Indigenous people's conservation is integrated with our traditional harvesting. So we know that the areas of the world where the most biodiversity exists is places where we still hunt and fish and farm and gather. And it's very much integrated with our food sovereignty. And so it seems like IPCAs might be a point of entry to better understand how the system itself, how we can reconceptualize frameworks for foodland conservation areas from the broader kind of cultural scope and scale of Indigenous hunting, subsistence hunting, fishing, and gathering, because that's very different from the frameworks for foodland conservation that is currently, even internationally, within the report that was developed by the International Institute for Agriculture, Science and Technology Development, where 120 countries got together about 8 or 9 years ago and prepared a report about institutional frameworks for agriculture and how they were very narrowly defined within kind of the large-scale industrial monocrop agriculture. So they were successful at positioning agroecology into a framework for agroecology at the international scale, but still Indigenous peoples, it lacked the participation and the representation of Indigenous food systems, which are, in our part of the world, we're persisting still in probably the oldest living economy on the planet, which is subsistence hunting, fishing, and gathering. So when we think about land back, we really need to move beyond, or the system needs to move beyond just the arbitrary political boundaries and the political frameworks that were established to dispossess us. And so Canada, we're a long ways from that. One of the top colonized countries in the world, the top 4. We know that that's the same framework, Western science-based resource management system, that's being asserted all over the world. And so we're not alone in that, but I think there's huge potential to kind of reconceptualize the frameworks and look at concepts around food and land back specifically. And so that's a pretty big tall order. But if I think at the very least, it challenges the system to balance the burden of the cross-cultural understanding, where we as Indigenous peoples are often challenged to increase our technical capacity to be able to work in this system and monitor and protect our lands. And, you know, it's a huge burden. And when really what we want to be doing is living the reality but yeah, calling on the system to kind of carry some of that burden, to dismantle their conceptual frameworks that really just impose a cultural hierarchy and a narrative that is, you know, has erased us essentially. So, but I guess at the very most, it would support a network of, in our territory or in our part of the territory, we're mobilizing hunters and berry pickers with an app that we've developed to gather our own data on a secure database with a partner, Digital Democracy, to be able to assert the voices of the actual people on the ground who are actually monitoring and actually conserving the plants and the animals by way of knowing what is the most effective way to conserve and protect. But those people are often absent at decision-making tables, and the data or the knowledge, the system hasn't figured out a way yet to actually apply that in a meaningful way. So I know that's I guess a question as much as it is as a proposal, but it's still very much in development and needing more support for sure. But yeah, so just leave it at that. Cook's Jam.
Thank you for sharing. Is there anybody that want to share, like, how are you making sure that those that are those Indigenous communities are the ones that are making the decisions on how to use the funding that they're getting, or like what is it that they are using the funding for? Like, is there any like success stories that you can share with us today? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thanks. I thought it might be worthwhile just to share a few things from an Australian perspective. I'm not sure of what the audience kind of knows about Australia and the context, but it's a pretty big country, and we've had a well-established land rights framework in place for 40 plus years, and we've had some big developments in conservation estates, Indigenous protected areas, for example, that have continually been growing. So I thought to answer a few of the questions and give another example. I'm not sure how it can be applied to a global discussion, because Australia is just a long way away and we get left out a lot of global discussions because we don't have the opportunities. The native title framework in Australia is fairly well established. In the north of Australia, 80% is either Indigenous freeholds or determined native title land. That's a pretty big chunk of the country, roughly about 4 million square kilometres. What we're continually finding is that owning 80% of something hasn't translated in the type of outcomes you'd expect from owning that amount of country. So in terms of commercial, economic, social, the two outputs that are always prioritised by Indigenous groups in Australia is cultural and environmental. That just seems to be a normal way of doing business. But under a federal framework, the examples of ICPAs, so our equivalent is Indigenous protected areas. They're a good platform. They form about 50% of Australia's national reserve system, along with parks. But essentially, they're only voluntary agreements, and you don't have a lot of rights of what you can do on there. In the case of native title, and you mentioned land rights, but also sea rights, there's been a legal framework that has proven and set a precedence around Indigenous rights to sea and sea country. They had the biggest sea claim in North Australia just last year, which was the first of its kind. And a lot of Indigenous groups now have coastal rights, sea rights that have been recognised. But again, it looks good on paper and on a map, but it doesn't translate into economic opportunities that you'd expect. So there are some good things, I think, to reflect on that's happened in Australia, but as it is now, I've probably got more rights to land if I go and buy a block of land or a real estate pad than compared to what's under native title. So some people, hear about land rights in Australia and they think, it's perfect, but it's far from it. But the other thing is, it is the only current framework we've got in place with a system in place. Yeah, there's a bit to talk about in that, but if there's any, opportunities to, one, just know more about what's happening from a global perspective around Indigenous territories and rights, because we've been doing that for a long time. But sometimes what we've found is there's no benchmarks or standards to how this could be measured. So I'd be really interested to see how IFIP and global discussions handle that.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We're going to take note of that. And also, and just precisely, this is what it's really important for us to know, what are the gaps that you can see in what is currently out there. We'd love to take note of that if you want to mention something that you have noticed, that you would like to see in this report as well. This is the opportunity for us to ask the researchers to also work a little bit on that. So for that, you want to say something?
I mean, being more new to this particular space, I was thinking just what is working for funders and what are some of the, we've heard some of that yesterday as well. The methodologies and the frameworks that funders are able to support and looking to support in terms of successful land back projects. And I think there's something also around the sacred site piece and ceremonial spaces and just land being a centered partner within a lot of work that's being done by Indigenous communities. And is it always necessary for the narratives around land back to have to become linked to some sort of restoration work or conservation work or community-based program, or can it just be land for the sake of this is the land that's powering the work that we're doing? Or at least that's what I've heard from people that I've been working with. So for me, it would just be, trying to learn about what is working from the global narrative from a philanthropic point of view, so that we can better align ourselves to some of the methodologies and hear it from the communities as opposed to the funders leading the charge in terms of this is how we want it to look and these are the boxes that we want it to fit into. What would you like from us? I think would be what I would like to learn more about.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think this is a great opportunity to hear if any of you already experience or can share with you methodologies that have worked. We would love to hear about those. Chris?
Sure.
Now it's on. One thing on the question about what is working for funders that I see and hear a lot about is funders getting really excited about conservation projects, which is hugely problematic depending on the context you're in. So to answer the question, it's like, funders are stoked about conservation projects. But from my perspective, this is not wearing my work hat. Like, as a Secwepemc woman, I can get really irritated with the concept because conservation for all is not what I'm interested in my territory, especially for sacred sites and for food sovereignty efforts. But that's one of the driving forces that people get really attached and romancing the idea of, like, we're funders who save this beautiful wilderness, right? So then it's like it's still a conquest, it's still an ownership, it's still a thing I can put my logo or my name or my badge to. So one of the responses I think that's worth considering is, what we know is that communities need funds to purchase land because purchased land has more flexibility than being put under conservation, land trusts, or being pulled onto reserve lands or tribal lands. So, but the technical and the administrative responsibility for figuring out how to do that belongs with funders. And I think that requires a lot of courageous conversations and things like, we're going to take our money out, we're going to spend down, we're going to do those pieces, because I think communities have been really clear, right? Those are the pieces. So one piece related to the conservation is, as funders in the space talking with other funders, I think it's worthwhile to interrogate the conception of conservation for all. And for the other piece is conservation for tourism that forces communities to be attached to tourism in their own territories as the only method for economic development or requiring the relationship to land back. Because in some of my territories, tourists have access to territories that our own community members don't have access to because of the costs, right? So how do you rethink and support people to do that as well? Well, I think it's just good for us to say out loud anyways.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's trying to, what are the other narratives? I mean, I come in from a conservation hat, but I know that that is not the narrative that is required in this conversation. So that's what I'm trying to ask, is exactly that. What are the, so is it literally, is it just as simple as getting funding to you for that flexibility to fund? But then we need to look at philanthropic loans and all other kinds of scenarios to get that big funding to come into the community so that you have access to the funding when the land arrives.
The big narrative and strategy is funding legal defense as well. So that's the other thing that I've seen really interesting things happen, not just in the Canadian context, but in other places. It's actually not the conservation, the programming. It's, here's money for your legal defense, or for, sometimes they'll call it research, legal research and education. So funders can get creative about how they title it so they can make the contribution. But then that's what enables the communities to actually litigate, to take the rights, like to assert their rights. The other really useful tool is UNDRIP. Understanding how it is that you can use UNDRIP as a mechanism to transfer resources under a rights-based framework can also be really helpful.
Thank you, Chris, because the critical analysis around conservation is something that myself, as a curator of our Indigenous foodland conservation research, has been really questioning and saying that we need to preface our research and the development of the concept of Indigenous foodland conservation as one of many interim measures to protect our land in the journey of, or until we establish title and rights. I mean, the legal, I think it's also an important strategy for our harvesters to be out on the land documenting the use of our land. I guess it's all under duress, really, that we even have to do that, because we've done it for thousands of years without having to to document it in the same way. And so I guess I want to interview you in our research project, I think, because that's an important part of it, or maybe invite you to our advisory committee or something, because this is exactly, I think when we think of the systemic challenges of land back, I know fee simple for sure is something the elders in our community are definitely not interested in, even though we've got huge conglomerate like corporations walking into our band office with the nerve to want to sell our land back to us. And of course, some people have actually thought of it because of again, under duress. We're doing, we're looking at multiple strategies. But I think it's really important to say and preface it with exactly what Chris has just brought to our attention. But yeah, I guess, and so in thinking of, in Canada anyways, the system of governance, the elected system, and the way that decisions are made, it's, really, to me, that's a core issue in any model of land back, because the capacity for communities to be involved, the people who are most affected or who have the most knowledge in many cases about our harvesting and our relationship to the land, are not in positions of power, and those positions of power change fairly regularly. In my community, we're starting with a brand new band council who are brand new. None of them have been in politics before. It's very intense, and it'll probably be at least a couple of years before they're up to speed. In the meantime, every square inch of our territory is being looked at for either land or water grabbing, tourism, forestry, mining. I mean, we can't keep up to the number of land referrals in the system that is very flawed. So again, we look at multiple strategies, and I think this kind of conversation has kind of given me inspiration for our next funders workshop to think of some of the funding that we need to focus on this kind of work and critical analysis. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Is there anybody, how do you say? Is there like somebody else wants to share what is working for you, for your organization, or what is it that funders are supporting at this point? ¿Podemos darle un micrófono a él, por favor?
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of really good points that I completely agree with, and it's something that might be applied more in a global discussion. In Australia, colonial conservation is alive and well and a big issue. We see a lot of opportunities with potential investment, philanthropies, partnerships with conservation orgs to buy land and have the rights that go along with it. But half of the problem is trying to get those partners to understand what's important for Indigenous peoples. And a lot of the time, people will care more about an animal or a plant than the people from that country. For me, it seems pretty straightforward that you look after the people first and let them look after the plants and animals and the water and their soils. But a conservation framework in Australia and some global context doesn't recognise that. So touching on the example of what UNDRIP gives us, I think there's a real need for an equivalent to that as a set of benchmarks or standards that if an investor wants to buy something, I mean, they can buy whatever they want, but if they want to do a partnership with Indigenous groups in Australia, we would have a set of prerequisites that have to be met before that happens. But it also reflects back on the resourcing of each group, because some of them will take whatever they can get and it doesn't suit their purpose. And you've got so many variable examples of where there's good conservation partnerships, but there's also a lot more really bad ones. I think the global context can help guide that, again, using that example of UNDRIP, where there's some principles and points that need to be met to be, effective or ethical. because there's no standards in Australia about how philanthropic investments are done. There's either good ones or bad ones, not a lot in between. But it's a real issue, and the interest is growing in wanting to buy land for conservation, and the risk is that they lose the cultural component of that land.
Do we have somebody else that wants to share? No?
Yeah, I just want to touch on your point about caring for the people who will then care for the plants and the animals and the water. So at Honnold Foundation, one of the things that we prioritize is the people in the community come first, right? And so grants are unrestricted. They tell us what they want. We provide the funding for it, and there are very few questions. And I think part of what happens with that is that capacity and development gets built up in the community so that they can then defend their lands. So one example is the stations that we helped fund in Ecuador. They decided that those funds were going to go to those stations. They were then able to collect video and photo evidence, which then helped them win a Supreme Court battle. Like, they wouldn't have been able to do that without those photos and without the video. So I think when you think about land back, thinking about it creatively and all of the things that go into land back. Another great example for us is a community that we work with in the Brazilian Amazon and funding agroecology and food pulpers. And as a result of access to energy, more people have come back into the community. And so there's a larger mass of people there that are now caring for and defending their lands. So it's like thinking about it more creatively outside of the concept of just the land, thinking about it as the community first.
Gracias. We have been taking some notes, and also, like, I'm glad this is recorded so we can just go back and listen to that and even provide it to the researchers, or like I will summarize it and give it to them. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Lower this.
Yeah, I was in a meeting before this conversation, but it's also emerging other conversations around, and I think it was already mentioned, but around the connection of economic models, because it seems to be that at the end of the day, and while we can think about all these ways in which we can support land back or land rights in the context of the global movement, we're still up against economic models that create the situations in which indigenous peoples are displaced, natural resources continue to be extracted, you still have defenders being killed, you still need support to do the legal battles. And so until we connect the two, and economic models that also, in the one level, trying to shift the current economic models, but on the other level, there's also, when there is the land rights or the land back, then how do we support self-determined economic models that are actually going to sustain or support the well-being of the communities in the way in which they want to utilize or see how their communities benefit once they have the land back. So I think maybe there's still that connection that needs to be happening, even within the conservation funders, who yes, we can talk about protected areas, which are not the solution. And there's a lot of reports and documents that have been put out there by the UN Special Rapporteurs, particularly on conservation and the impact on conservation. But I think we're still missing that connection. And then We can meet as a working group that is wanting to learn, understand, and be responsive. But I think we also need to bring those other funders that are thinking about economic models. And I think those two together things, then we can think about, I want to know more about how you're thinking about the marine tenure facility equivalent of that land tenure facility. And because fisheries, so for instance, in Peru, in the ocean of Peru, they find any given day like over 600 boats that are coming from China to fish in the waters of Peru with no permits. They just come and take. Nobody monitoring, nobody saying anything. And so we really need to look at that. We can continue to think about saving forests, but until there is a shift on economic models, I think we're going to continue to try to address the symptoms, which, yes, we need support to do all of that, but we need also the funders who are also benefiting from those the economic models to say more about shifting the economic models that we're in.
Are we all okay? Like, do you need 5 minutes to go and get some water? It's really warm here. No, I have water. I have my water. My bag is there, but what about you? Do you want to take 5 minutes and go and get some, I don't know, like maybe go inside of the restaurant area to get some fresh air? We're okay? Are we okay? Yes? Okay, good. So what I want you to do now is we have like some sticky notes. ¿Me ayudas, Víctor, por favor? Vamos a repartir algunos de estos. Ajá. Do you all have pens? ¿Sí? Tenemos unos de estos también, si los podemos pasar. And they're going to help us to give you some of those sticky notes and pens. We're going to need those later. We want to have a discussion about, like, one of the purpose of creating this working group was like to collaborate, to work together. So this is just a great opportunity for us to discuss what is it that we want to see this year. How can IFIP help you? And how can you do your work through IFIP? How can we support each other? And so we want to hear a little bit about that. And then I will kindly ask you to please write also on your sticky notes some ideas that you want to see this year, that you want to see other organizations doing, and how can IFIP support that? But I don't know, like, we have been doing webinars. Do you find that useful? Like, have you been able to attend some of those? We just want to have like a really honest discussion about what is it that you want to see and what is it that you just don't.
So in 2022, at least at the beginning, we kind of had a thematic series looking at different ways to employ FPIC as funders. And I think having that kind of trajectory was very helpful, as opposed to a bunch of webinars that kind of focus on different things. So just resonating on the conversation we've had about land back, it could be interesting to do different kind of strategy calls. So one focused on legal advocacy, one focused on changing the funder narrative away from conservation as rationale, another on funding advocacy, but just kind of having entry points into funding land back. And I think that could help us with our kind of regional issues that we've run into before. So that's just one suggestion, is kind of webinar series that we could take forward in 2023.
Yes, I promise we're going to work on that. It's just like, I don't know, for the last few weeks, months, we have been focusing on this conference, and it's just, this is why we want to continue working. I really like that, Claire. Looks very fancy. Somebody else?
I just wanted to add, the question around methodologies is, I feel like it's important for funders and the system at large to embrace a transformative methodology, because often in the Western science-based resource management system and the capitalist accounting system, it's expected you have evidence, and it's expected it's a very linear process. And organizing for social change is very non-linear. And so a transformative methodology that, like, even in this conversation here today, I think there's a lot of contradictions. And I know in my culture, Coyote, who teaches through contradictions, and he's the trickster. And I'm aware that many Indigenous peoples have stories and teachings around the trickster and transformation. And I think that having methodologies that embrace those contradictions is transformative. And so I feel like that's really important. And especially if we're looking at for systems change transformation, which I know some funders are actually funding. And so, yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
You want? No? Okay, so if nobody else is sharing something, I want you to please think about what is it that you would like to see us doing this year in your sticky notes, and then I will kindly ask you to come. We will have like these two spaces here where you can stick your notes. I think that's how. Please take a few minutes to think about what is it that, for instance, you have seen other working groups doing, and you have enjoyed that, you have seen that really helping communities. So that's what we also want to implement, and we want to help you. We want to support you doing that. No, vamos a quitar este para que...
Repeat what it is you're asking us.
What is it that you would like to see us working on? Like, I don't know, maybe for IFIP. Yes. Yeah, for us, for your organization. I just want to make sure that what I asked was clear. She was just asking me what was the question, so maybe it was. Yeah. What we would love to know is like what can we do? What is it that IFIP can do for like in the next year, for this year, to like, let's say workshops or webinars, and maybe posting about the work that you are doing on our website. What is it that you would love us to, like, you want us to do? Is that clear? Yes? Okay.
I just think it might be relevant for others as well. How do we, because if we're members of IFIP, how do we get involved in the working groups? Are you going to follow up with an email after this? So that we can
Yes,
join?
so if you're a member of IFIP, then follow up with Annabelle to make sure you're included on the email updates that we send out.
Maybe we can just have everyone who's interested in being on the list to just fill out a post-it with your name and email, and we can put it up there.
Yeah. And there's also the opportunity, and I know this seems very global, but like that's the space of a global network. We cannot always reach to the bases, at least through some of the work that we do. But there is also the permanent forum coming up, and the Thematic the theme of this year is around climate change and territories, I believe. So, what are some of the perhaps dialogues that can happen to continue to inform and think about some of the questions that have come out here, some of the models that were mentioned, and I really would like to invite Naisma to say more because I know you've been doing so much work around particularly sea management and thinking about economic models in your communities because I think that's one area. But if there's might be an opportunity, and an IFIP is keen to think about with our members how we can kind of or organize either a side event or a conversation there with all the indigenous peoples that are going to be going, and many of them will be coming to present or to share what's happening in their countries around this theme.
A few more minutes, and then we are gonna post them here, and we will be grouping them in within thematic thematic areas here. If you have your stickies ready, you're welcome to start putting them on that flip chart, please.
¿Sí? No. Sorry. Oh, that's you.
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, you can put it anywhere. Anywhere, because we're gonna regroup. Yeah, we're gonna. So I don't. If you wanted to just skip it, I will just skip it and say it right. I did sign up on a thing. Gracias.
Se están volando. Vamos a traer masking. Voy a traer masking. Disculpa, ¿podrías traer masking? ¿Sabes dónde está?
¿Las cintas?
Ajá. Mauricio, ¿tú nos podrías ayudar a reagruparlos? ¿A reagruparlos? ¿A
ponerlos en un tablito?
No, reagruparlos. Sí, eso que thank you. We are now going to take like a few minutes just to group them in teams. Just 2 or 3 minutes, please.
I'm gonna sneak away and see if we can start the film festival early. Okay.
Okay, so we have grouped those. We have different thematic, different themes here. We can see here unlearning, and I was hoping to, if Mauricio can a little bit explain what is unlearning. He's the one that helped us with all of those. Just 1 minute.
This framing is my wording. So I know engaging funders to undermine what's undermining the processes behind trade-offs and other things. Session focus on the ways to reverse conservation mindset, linked mindset, if you might. Here. Okay, good. So problems around conservation frameworks. So I group them under the unlearning because that's a whole nother process beyond learning. Then this is sessions focused on specific regions, if you might, like place-based, I call them. I don't know if it's appropriate here. Learning journeys or visiting projects around learning what's works, so case studies, sharing experiences, info sharing, more like infographics or publicly available events, or people show how their work's doing on community and outside of them. And then relationship building, it's more of the facilitating networking, learning and seeing different trends, or people are asking for boot camps or like this thematic webinar series that build upon a specific theme. Those were the highlights. Thank you.
Gracias, Mauricio. So we can see here like some info sharing, and that's something we want to do in the website. We want to start sharing what our members are doing. We want other people to see all the great work that you all are doing. And so thank you for mentioning that here. Here we can see that also webinars will be a great idea for us to be engaged. Here somewhere in relationship building, I'm just going to read a couple of them, and they say facilitating networking, relationship building with funders, and like conference gatherings to embrace contradictions. Like that, it's also like something we need to work on, and we're glad that that was mentioned. Here we can see a series of webinars on different strategies to support land back initiatives, legal support, advocacy. So we're really thankful for all of those ideas. We are going to take them into account. Early March, we will be working on developing the plan for this year, the work plan for this year, and we will kindly ask Anne and Claire to, for their feedback. I'm so glad they're here today, so we can all create a plan that is going to work for all of us here. And with that, if you don't have any more questions, I think we will be ending. Preguntas, questions? Sorry, Mauricio, I ask you like, yeah, sorry, you probably were not prepared for that question, but it was your idea to group it in this way, so this is why.
Any other proposition? Welcome.
Likewise, if anyone would like to take on a co-chair or planning role.
What does that mean, Claire? You don't want to be a co-chair anymore?
Just looking for more folks.
Yeah.
Could folks share how often has the group been meeting? What has that been looking like? Because then if you have folks here to know a bit more about what it entails. Like from the chairs? And like, what is the makeup of the group currently? Are you looking for people from certain regions, certain skills?
So
Wow. That raises a really good point. We have a kind of membership list, but it's basically just name and contact information. So maybe we can start having folks kind of fill out a bit more information. Where are they funding? Where are they looking to get more information? So we can definitely prioritize that. This past year was still kind of a COVID type year. So the paper that was handed out at the beginning was kind of a syllabus of what we did this year. So 3 webinars focused on supporting and learning more about FPIC. One kind of leading up to the COP, supporting Indigenous partners that are attending. And there was one other, but this was very kind of webinar focused, which we understand has value and pitfalls. So another thing in a different group that I kind of help organize, we've done, and this might be in the relationship building piece, but keeping track of other events like IFIP that members might be at in order to find time to kind of just build relationships or have lunch or figure out how to plug in what we're thinking about in IFIP into different contexts. So we could start something like that as well. But ideas are very welcome. Anne and I love it. We'd also love additional help if anyone is interested. And yeah, getting out of the exclusive virtual format is definitely something I think we'd be interested in doing now that folks are on the road a little bit more.
No, I mean, I think the meeting has been ad hoc. But I think it would be great if it was more regular, even just check-in calls on a quarterly basis, just to keep things moving. Yeah, so that's all.
Gracias. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Claire. Yeah. Do we have any?
One thing I would say, with this research team, I'm assuming you're talking about Archipel.
Mhm.
I do think there's probably a really near-term opportunity for those that want to engage in that process to inform the report. Like, what do we want to see in that report that would be helpful? So it might be a mini working group that works with Archipel to, I don't know if you'd be open to that, Annabelle or
I
Lourdes.
think they're really open to that, actually.
Yeah. So that might, because what's the timeline for that?
The deadline was before this conference.
No, but the secondary report, because you said
oh,
there's.
no, like that one. That one is for like sometime in April. So like we still have like a few weeks.
For just the territories piece or the global scan?
For the territory piece.
Oh, that's soon.
But we are moving that. So it will be, I don't have the exact date right now, but it was April, so probably another month.
Okay. So it's a near-term thing that we could engage on.
We can engage there, yes, for sure. So, yeah, I'm gonna take a picture now. Okay, are we okay? Yes, okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And I hope you're enjoying Merida. I can see the Canadians are really, really happy. I just saw there is a snowstorm, a really bad snowstorm in Vancouver. Yeah, no. Like minus 40 to 40. Yeah, that's a big change. Gracias. Sí, vamos a tomarle foto nada más. So Lourdes went to check if we can start the film festival earlier. So that might happen. And that will be right here. So you don't have to go anywhere. It will be right here, yeah. Snacks are going to be provided, but we're...
I know.
Hola a todos, muy buenas tardes. Invito a todos para que lleguen más cercana para empezar la muestra de cine que tenemos preparado para ustedes, que tomen asiento. Bueno, una chica she, un Taili. Quería saludarlos en mi idioma materno. También agradecer a los pueblos maya que nos reciben en su territorio y también a los ancestros que están acá con nosotros. Como dice mi idioma, yo soy Taili, hago parte de los pueblos terena de la región del Pantanal Chaco brasileño. Tengo 29 años y hace más de 15 años que estoy involucrada con las cuestiones indígenas de mi pueblo y de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas a nivel nacional e internacional. La juventud hoy vive entre dos mundos, lo tradicional y lo occidental, y acaba a nosotros sacar lo mejor de ellos para asegurar una vida plena para las futuras generaciones de nuestro pueblo y el buen vivir del planeta.
Gracias. Shabijit Maroni. Buenas tardes con todos. Les saludo en mi idioma, que es Ashaninka. Soy Nela Edith Impoquiro Chapay Marcos, tengo 20 años, soy de Perú, soy joven Ashaninka. Desde mi adolescencia empezó mi interés por hablar de forma pública sobre los problemas que veo en mi comunidad, en especial sobre las violencias que sufrimos las niñas y jóvenes indígenas. Y hoy somos una nueva generación de jóvenes indígenas que usamos herramientas como el cine para dar a conocer la realidad de nuestras comunidades. En esta tarde presentamos la muestra de cine indígena Hijas de la Madre Tierra, concebido bajo el lema de Voces e Imágenes para la Sanación. Estas películas nos permitirán conocer a diferentes pueblos indígenas del mundo y ha sido realizada por mujeres jóvenes indígenas desde su propia visión y narración.
Agradecemos al International Funders for Indigenous Peoples, IFIP, y Chirapac, Centro de Culturas Indígenas del Perú, y la Coordinadora Latinoamericana de Cine y Comunicación de Pueblos Indígenas, CLACPI, y aquí hacemos parte y que han hecho posible que esta muestra de cine sea posible. Y también a todos ustedes que nos acompañan a esta tarde. Los pueblos indígenas hemos pasado de sujetos tratados por las cámaras a convertirnos en creadores de imágenes y narrativas propias. Así, como en nuestras culturas y cosmologías, el cine indígena no recoge la mirada de una sola persona. Su realización es plural y colectiva y sus temáticas responden demandas de la comunidad, retratando nuestras realidades y luchas, así como nuestros conocimientos ancestrales.
Hijas de la Madre Tierra muestra el papel que las mujeres indígenas están ocupando en la lucha por nuestros derechos. Nuestras historias entretejen hilos en común y reflejan nuestro control como portadoras del saber de nuestros pueblos, pero también las múltiples formas en las que vivimos las violencias a lo largo de nuestras vidas. Hablamos de violencias en plural porque son diversas las formas de violencias que enfrentamos y las cuales han sido retratadas en las conmovedoras películas que veremos esta tarde.
Chirapac trabaja por la afirmación de la identidad y el reconocimiento de los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Una de las estrategias que empleamos es empoderar a las mujeres y jóvenes indígenas para que, haciendo uso del audiovisual, puedan retratar sus propias realidades y luchas. Además de apoyar algunas de las películas que veremos hoy, igualmente organizamos festivales periódicos a nivel local y global para que estas historias lleguen a más personas interesadas y aliadas a la causa indígena como ustedes.
Bien, queremos ahora invitar al escenario a nuestra hermana Lourdes Minga, directora del IFIP, quien dará por inaugurado este espacio. Por favor.
Lourdes, por favor.
Hello, everyone. If you're still making your way, we hope you take a seat so that we can enjoy the films that the team from Chiapac, together with Tylee and Sophia, have curated with us. I also want to acknowledge Veronica Vargas of the team of Chiapac, who has been partnering with the IFIP team to bring the film festival here to Mérida. Maybe just to add a few more words about the importance of, we always hear about in philanthropy, the importance of narrative change, the importance of storytelling. But I think even more important is funding and supporting Indigenous filmmakers Indigenous storytellers, Indigenous communicators who know best how to bring these stories to us. And today, we are very fortunate to be able to watch a series of films that were made by Indigenous women. So without further delay, and I really hope that people that are still standing and talking to the side to come please join us. Please enjoy the film. It's, I think it's a labor of love, and I really wanna commend the work of Chirapac for continuing to bring attention to not only the topic of Indigenous women under the leadership of Tarsila Rivera Sea, but also the importance of art, as we've seen here, and importance of communication and storytelling. Thank you again, and enjoy it.
Gracias. Entonces, gracias Lourdes por tus amables palabras y una vez más solo afirmando de por qué investir en el desarrollo del cine indígena. Creemos en la diversidad de las narrativas y nosotros vemos que en este medio es un camino para fortalecer liderazgos de mujeres y jóvenes, de abordar temas que muchas veces no son sensibles y de romper estereotipos sobre nosotras. Si están interesados en saber más, al término de la proyección, tenemos una pequeña ronda de preguntas con Sofía, con la hermana Tarsila, y sí, ahora sí disfruten de una bella muestra de cine que hicimos para ustedes. Gracias. Fuerte, ¿no? Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos que se quedaron, acompañaron a esta muestra de cine. Gustaría de invitar a hermana Tarsila Rivera para conducir una breve ronda de preguntas.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a las valientes personas que se quedaron hasta el final, con la angustia de perder el bus. En primer lugar, quisiera pedir nuestro aplauso a Sofía, que no sé si reconocen cuál de las películas es en la que ella ha participado, del pueblo Asháninka, Sofía. Y luego me gustaría recibir, no sé, 2 o 3 comentarios muy breves, porque todos estamos ya con un pie afuera. ¿Alguien quiere comentar algo que le haya impresionado, que le haya impresionado más alguno de los cortos? Gracias.
Gracias por esta presentación fuerte, muy fuerte, tensa, pero necesaria de ir mostrando cada vez más la violencia hacia las mujeres, que es sistemática. Así que sí, yo quería salir corriendo, pero aquí estamos y gracias por ponerlo y esperemos que esto vaya transformándose. Y el ejemplo último fue extraordinario, ¿no? Cómo el padre, los hombres, forman parte de este ritual tan hermoso y que permite, ¿no?, una sanación integral a las familias y a las niñas. Así que bueno, se puede hablar mucho de la violencia, pero pues sí, ya estamos cansados. Pero este es un tema que nos debemos seguir hablando, de la violencia a las mujeres, y especialmente a las niñas y niños.
Y ustedes, las mexicanas, deben estar muy orgullosas. Yo como mixteca estoy muy orgullosa. Adoro a 2 cineastas indígenas de Oaxaca. La tiricia es de... ¿Alguien sabe? Ángeles Cruz, que acaba de ser reconocida con un premio en México, ¿no? Y la otra es Itanevi Jansen, mi amiguita.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Yo soy Tania Turner de Fondos Semillas. Yo quiero celebrar justo lo que estás diciendo, Tarsila, que es producción de comunidades y personas indígenas con su propia voz, con sus historias y la manera en que ellas lo quieren contar. Y creo que esto es algo que es para mí muy importante en este momento porque vemos mucho crecimiento, bueno, crecimiento y decrecimiento al mismo tiempo, pero mucho crecimiento del cine documental como nuevas narrativas también de denuncia y formas también de hacer incidencia y lograr pues que más población, no solamente quienes ya conocemos los temas y quienes ya trabajamos los temas, más población se dé cuenta de lo que está sucediendo. En ese sentido, no solo celebro, sino que me parece que es importante hacer énfasis de quién está contando la historia. Y cuando estamos financiando documental, ¿a quién le estamos dando los recursos para contar esas historias? Ya no podemos no mirar cuando hay procesos extractivos también en esto. Entonces, creo que las mujeres indígenas están generando cine documental bien interesante y necesitan recursos y no necesitan intermediarios para poder hacer sus documentales. Lleguemos a ellas, lleguemos a esas mujeres que tienen que contar su historia y que saben contar su historia. Creo que es momento de sí justamente dar voz a las voces que quieren hablar y dejar de hablar por, ¿no? Entonces lo quiero decir acá porque sí sabemos de también muchos documentales con muy buenas intenciones, pero que las palmas, los recursos económicos de vuelta cuando se presentan en festivales, los premios, etcétera, etcétera, se terminan quedando nuevamente en las personas que no son las que están saliendo ahí contando sus historias y luego ni siquiera tienen posibilidad de utilizar el documental o el producto para poder dar voz a sus luchas. Entonces, creo que es importante ahí pensar cómo le hacemos para también generar procesos de igualdad, de reciprocidad y de darle el reconocimiento a las personas que hay que darles el reconocimiento porque son quienes están poniendo sus cuerpos, sus luchas y sus memorias en esos lugares, ¿no? Gracias, Tarsila.
Muchas gracias. ¿Alguien más? ¿No? ¿Cerramos? ¿Quién va a cerrar? ¿Por IFIP? ¿Nadie? Nosotras cerramos by ourselves. Bueno, quiero contarles muy corto que nosotros, los de Chirapa, pensamos en la imagen justamente para recuperar el conocimiento de los mayores y transmitir a las nuevas generaciones. Y nos dimos cuenta que la imagen es muy efectiva en las comunidades. En el 1992, un anciano de 114 años nos dejó su legado. Cuando todos hablaban de género, igualdad de género y no entendíamos, le preguntamos al anciano, ¿qué significa las relaciones entre ellos? Y a través de un cortito nos dejó su palabra que él mismo le llamó mi vida al infinito. Y fuimos siguiéndole con una cámara, en ese tiempo B8, y él iba caminando, iba diciendo, filmen acá, tomen aquí, filmen acá, hasta que nos dejó esto. todo vale cuando está en su punto de equilibrio. Las cosas valen tanteo puntum, en el punto de equilibrio. Y lo hemos recuperado para aplicarlo en todo orden, ¿no? Porque es un pensamiento nuestro. Tú te relacionas en equilibrio con el diferente, no más ni menos. Te relacionas en relaciones de equilibrio con el menor, con el mayor, con los vecinos. No lo miras menos ni más. Todo tiene que estar en el mismo nivel. Y entonces con ese documental nos enteramos y nos metimos a CLACPI, que es la coordinadora de cine indígena ahora, ¿no? Que es ya global. Y cada año hacemos, nosotros en Perú, muestra de cine. Y vamos por comunidades con cortos y films preparados, presentados por indígenas. Y es la comunidad que visualizando va eligiendo cuál de ellos será el ganador, cuál de los cortos. Y luego venimos a un festival en la capital. Y claro, tenemos que buscar aliados estratégicos para tener espacio y todo lo demás. Nos toca la responsabilidad de organizar, Vargas, ¿cómo se llama? Festival de Cine Indígena, que será el 2024, el año que viene. El 2024 en Perú. ¿Cómo lo haremos? No sabemos. Así que vamos a buscar más aliados porque justamente nos interesa mostrar lo que hacemos los y las indígenas en primera persona, desde la primera voz. Esta selección corresponde a un eje temático, mujeres y violencias, que hemos ya hecho recorrer en varios lugares. Así que muchísimas gracias, un aplauso por haberse quedado y nos vemos en el Festival de Cine Internacional.